Hey everybody, it's Greg here. How are you this evening? It's a cold, wet night in Oregon, and we only have 1 week to go. So, a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. The week 8 practice final is in the course, and you're welcome to work on that. And if you would like, I can give you the answers. And the real final will be mailed to you, emailed to you on Sunday night, and then you will have 5 days to finish it. So that will be due on Friday of week 8. So once again, that'll be mailed on Sunday night, and there is a regular assignment that will be as usual, that will be due on Sunday morning. So this is our last week. This is our best week. This is the week I think you're going to enjoy the most. The other thing to note is please go online and do the evaluation. That will help Concordia and their endeavor to make the EDD as strong as they can. So a couple of things came up this week in terms of the content. One of the questions was, what is power? Power increases in any statistical test when sample size increases. So let's say you hypothesize, let's use the cat's tails again, are 9 inches. And you collect a sample that has a sample mean of 6 inches and a standard deviation of 2, and you collect 20 samples. And then you conduct a test and get a p-value. Well, with the same sample mean and sample standard deviation, a sample of 50 cats would have more power because the p-value would be lower. So you increase the power of a statistical test when you increase sample size. That's all it means, no matter how many textbooks you read. All it means is that larger samples more easily reject the null hypothesis. Okay, the other thing is, two things on the chi-square. The chi-square is simply a proportion test. Okay, so if you wanted to conduct a chi-square test for independence dealing with gender and whether you like Ford or Chevy, then it's simply a proportion test. Do males like Ford and Chevys at the same proportion that females like more Ford and Chevys? That's all it's doing, is comparing proportions. Okay, so the question came up, is there an independent or a dependent variable? Well, it's just about proportions, but it makes no sense to say that the type of pickup you drive determines your gender. It would make more sense to say that the gender determines the model of pickup you drive. So yes, there can be an independent and dependent variable if you think of it that way. But it's basically just a test for equality of proportions between two groups. The other thing is the chi-square test for goodness of fit has a lot of applications, and everybody did pretty well on that. One of the applications of the chi-square test for goodness of fit is to see if a population is distributed normally. So let's say you have a distribution of test scores from some 10th graders in high school, and this is your distribution. 10% of them got 30, 10% got 10, 15% got 15. Well, I can't read upside down, but you can see the distribution there. Okay? And that's roughly normal. And as you can see, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories. Well, you could just use a chi-square test for goodness of fit to test the null hypothesis that the categories are that way, and the categories are roughly distribute the variable normally. So there's a good paper on that I might send you, and it deals with how the chi-square test for goodness of fit is used to test for whether a population is normal or not. Because if a population is normal, then its categories are distributed normally. Okay, so on to the last week. All right, this week is all about experiments, and it's all about cause and effect. Up to now, we've been measuring differences between groups, and this week is about how actual educational experiments are conducted. Now, I'm going to be sending you 8 PDF files, and they're not all to be read. They have some really interesting parts in all of them. And if you need some time, if you want some time over the holidays when you're at the in-laws and the conversation's winding down and you want to go read some of these studies, there's a wealth of information in that. The way you really get good at this is by reading lots of studies and trying to see what's happening. Then that will help you in your efforts too. So I'm going to be sending you a lot. Now, there's only one study in the week that we will be working on, and it is pretty important. So how does an experiment work? Well, first of all, an experiment seeks to establish some sort of cause-effect relationship. Now, the whole idea of cause-effect is very problematic and actually philosophical. But what we try and do is take a control group and an experimental group. So let's say we want to see if eating broccoli increases test scores for third graders. So we take two groups, we randomly choose 20 people from the population, and then we randomly put 10 students in the control group and 10 groups in the experimental group. And before we give them the training, or before class begins, we test them to see, with a two-sample t-test, to see if their score on some assessment would be roughly the same. In that case, we would want a very high p-value. We would want to reject the null hypothesis that there's any difference before the application of the independent variable. And that's what happens in the study that you're going to read this week. Then the experimental group gets to eat the broccoli. That is the manipulation of the independent variable. And the value of the variable is whether the broccoli was eaten or not. And after the treatment has been given, we're using a lot of psychology terms here. Psychology and education overlap in terms of the words they use for quantitative research. After the treatment's been given, a two-sample t-test is conducted to see if there's a statistically significant difference in the mean of the control and the experimental group. And if there is, then we say, well, since we had a control group, and hopefully we can rule out what are called third variables or confounding variables, things that might actually be the cause of the test scores, we can say in some sense that the independent variable eating broccoli was the cause of the higher test scores. Now, there's a whole lot to experimental research that's extremely complex. We're keeping it very simple this week. This is just your introduction. The key thing to keep in mind is you're going to have an assignment where you're going to have to look for an experimental research in a paper. And people are going to find experiments that use correlations, that use ANOVA, that use a lot of different things. The only thing we are dealing with this week are two independent sample t-tests. All our experiments will use just that. So we're going to keep it real simple, but whether an experiment is externally valid or not depends on the sample size and several other things. So we'll be going into that this week. So we've had a good week. Next week will be our last week. There's quite a bit to do. Please make sure you can get your assignment in on Sunday morning. And I think that's about all. Everybody's done very well this week. And we'll be in close communication. And everybody have a good day. Okay, bye.